I would be interested if there are things that you would rather see. You can get their brains around things they have.
Yeah, so I'm 7, so.
One microphone set up right now.
Just to do it.
All right, so Rigo's your go-to guy. Getting closer, huh? You're sitting closer.
Camera. So it's basically, well, it's a 4K thing that I can, it's like a television screen. So I can control where the camera zooms into, so it feels like it'll look a lot like Channel 8 stuff. It'll switch around as they speak. I can, oh look. So what I'll do is, so that's what you'll see will actually happen.
That's good. So you don't need to have my backside all meeting. Thank you.
Not the whole man of Walmart.
Not the whole meeting. Hey Scott, what's up?
Good evening. I'd like to call the September 26th Longmont City Council meeting to order. This is a regular session. Could we please start with the roll call?
Mayor Coons?
Here.
Councilmember Zachary? Christensen? Bentley? Here. Moore? Here. Peck? Here. Santos?
Here.
Mayor Coons, we have a quorum.
Okay, let's get pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be heard will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at first call public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their name on the list will have an opportunity to speak at final call public invited to be heard or on any of the public hearing items. Now we have the August 8th minutes to approve. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coons. I move we approve the August 8th minutes.
Second. Let's vote. Yes. And that passes 6-0 with Councilmember Gregory absent. Now we have the August 22nd minutes approved. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coons. I move we approve the August 22nd minutes.
Second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded by Councilmember Santos. Let's vote. That passes 6-0. And now we have the September 12th minutes to approve. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coons. I move we approve the September 12th minutes.
Okay. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coons. As I was unavoidably detained on September 12th, I wasn't at this meeting. I will be abstaining.
Okay. Let's vote. And that passes 5-0 with Councilmember Santos abstaining and actually now 6-0. Now, Councilmember Bailey's here. All right. So now it's time for agenda review. Councilmember Pat.
Thank you, Mayor Coons. I would like council to see if they would support letters from the LEDP and the Longmont Chamber to RTD to fund State Highway 119. Would you be willing to accept letters in support?
What's your question?
Fund 119 what?
Highway 119.
Fund State Highway 119 project. The State Highway 119 BRT project. I'm sorry.
Okay, so are we fine with that?
Want to support that? Copy just those letters from LEDP and let me explain a little bit. I went to the site selection breakfast that LEDP put on, and it was an incredible breakfast. And three of the reasons, the main reasons that companies choose a site to move to. On the top three is transportation. So I asked Jessica Erickson if we could have a talk about that, because I think that was very important. And we talked about would she support the State Highway 119 BRT project based upon the economics of businesses, et cetera, because they were pushing back on the funding for that. So we needed businesses support. And Scott Cook was there at the economic breakfast, and he and I talked as well, and I asked him if the chamber would be interested in supporting us. So now they are asked their boards, they told me they would have to ask their boards in the chamber. So now I'm asking council, would you accept those letters from, if they decided to write them, in support of the funding for the State Highway 119 BRT project?
Okay. Councilmember Santos, do you want to?
Thank you, Mayor Cruz. I think that's a wonderful idea. I'm assuming you're asking council to go ask our economic partners for those letters. Am I correct in that? That's what needs to occur.
Okay.
Is that we need to ask, an individual council member just can't go to our economic partner and say, hey, I'd like a letter for this. It needs to come from the council itself requesting those letters. So I would be in full support of asking our economic partners for any letters they wish to write in support of what you're proposing. Is that what that's what you're asking, correct?
I am.
Okay.
Okay, does everybody agree with that? Okay. Okay, thank you. All right. Valerie, is there any other agenda revisions?
No, Mayor Cruz, there are no revisions.
All right. Is there a report from city manager?
No report, Mayor, Council.
Okay. Then I guess we're now up to the special reports and presentation. I can Snap Savala, Board President, will accept this proclamation. And I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. A proclamation designating September 26, 2017 as Live and Give Longmont Day in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas the tremendous growth in the St. Vrain Valley has Longmont poised to become the largest city in Boulder County. And whereas Longmont appreciates the dozens of local nonprofits that support residents with their health, basic needs, and education needs, as well as those that work to improve the aesthetics of the community and overall quality of life through investment in the arts and the environment. And whereas Longmont recognizes the importance of charitable giving and supporting local nonprofits in their critical work now, as well for future generations. And whereas Live and Give Longmont aims to foster philanthropic giving among individuals and businesses to generate much needed revenue for non-existing nonprofits, and also to grow to ensure funding well into the future. Now, therefore, I, Dennis L. Coons, Mayor, by the virtue of authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim September 26, 2017 as Live and Give Longmont Day in Longmont, and invite all to embrace charitable giving and support of local nonprofits. Big statement or?
Mayor Coombs, members of council, my name is Matthew Zavala, and I'm the president of the Board of Trustees for the Longmont Community Foundation. On behalf of the board, our executive director, Eric Ozempa, and the staff of the Longmont Community Foundation, we'd like to thank you for this proclamation. And really, it's a celebration of all the nonprofits that we have in this community. I'm a lifelong resident of Longmont, proud to be from Longmont, and while we all love living here in Longmont, our nonprofits play a big part in the quality of life we have here. So, on behalf of the Longmont Community Foundation and all the nonprofits we have here in the St. Vrain Valley, we'd like to thank you. And if I could, I'd like to introduce our board members here tonight. John Caldwell, Vice President Bill Bernard, Jan Kanemoto, Susan Shirley, and Monica Baldwin. Again, thank you on behalf of the Longmont Community Foundation.
Right in the middle. Okay, everybody ready? Here we go. Thank you. Thanks, man.
Okay, so we're public invited to be heard. So the first person is Gordon Pedros. Please come down and state your name and address for the record.
Gordon Pedro, 2639 Falcon Drive, Longmont. Mayor and City Council members. I would like to share a couple of interesting headlines from the Times Call and Daily Camera from the past few weeks prior to getting to my point. August 23rd, Daily Camera. Erie Eyes Oil Gas Mapping. September 13th, Times Call. Operators must map their pipelines. And September 15th, Times Call. City and county to collaborate on response to oil and gas applications. Drilling proposed on properties owned by Longmont and the school district. On June 6, 2017, upon the request of Councilmember Beck, you directed staff to return with a report regarding setbacks around abandoned and plugged wells, along with flow lines and gathering lines. The city manager reported that the existing schedule would require that this item appear on an agenda in July. Councilmember Peck specifically stated that this request was a result of the deathly methane explosion in Firestone. Since June 6, Erie, Broomfield, Thornton, and Lafayette have all aggressively acted to protect their citizens from unregulated flow and collection lines. I say unregulated because officials from the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, the all-knowing, all-powerful protector of oil and gas industry's profits, have admitted that they do not know where all these lines are located and that regulating development near them is a local matter. Council members, I ask, where's your sense of urgency when it comes to protecting your residents? I never, ever expected to see Erie, Broomfield, Thornton, and Lafayette doing a better job of protecting their communities from this toxic industry than Longmont does. It is clear flow lines and pipelines are a matter of local control. This puts it in your hands, and it deserves your urgent attention. Thank you.
Michael Belmont.
Michael Belmont. I live at 841 Tenacity Drive in Longmont. Thank you, Council, Mayor. First, a big ditto on what Mr. Pedro just said. But tonight I want to thank you for your moral fortitude, exemplary compassion, and ethical example that you are proposing tonight by advocating for our DACA children by Resolution 2017-95. There's only one addition I would like to propose for the language in Section 2, line 13. The original states, urge the Trump administration to keep the DACA program in place, ensuring protection of these young people. May I suggest a small three-word insert in the language as follows. Urge the Trump administration to keep the DACA program in place, making it permanent, ensuring the protection of these young people. So and now I would like to lead any who choose to join in a song supporting the passage of that resolution to the familiar tune of Jesus Loves Me. DACA children, you now know we do not want you to go. We will fight to see you stay. Proud are we to stand and say, yes, DACA children. Yes, DACA children. Yes, DACA children. We love you as our own. DACA children, all you've known is this country as you've grown. Working hard, you've more than shown you deserve to call it home. Yes, DACA children. Yes, DACA children. Yes, DACA children. We love you as our own. DACA children, do not fear. Millions wish to keep you here. We will form a human wall to keep you in these hallowed halls. Yes, DACA children. Oh, yes, DACA children. Yes, DACA children. We love you as our own. And on one final note, my reading of the acronym DACA is Dedicated and Caring Americans.
Yeah.
James Kenworthy, 107 Kirby Place. That's going to be a hard act to follow. But when I heard about the DACA resolution, I thought at least I should show up. And while I'm here, make a few comments. I read two articles. No, I didn't read them. I read the headlines on these articles. And those headlines were something like, "This is the era of the cities." I'm going to explain later, not much later, what that means to me. The problem is, we have a man in the White House who has a laguna, a hollow, a vacancy inside him, which he can never fill. He seems to hate everybody, does not dislike him, which is really worrisome. We can't expect very much justice from the White House. No kindness, no respect, and we can't expect very much from the state. So, this is the era of the city. What does that mean? It means that a lot of people have finally recognized that it's up to the citizens of this country, and the city councils are the people, the leaders that are closest to the citizens. It's up to the citizens and the city councils to make this country what it should be, or what it used to be. It's up to us. That has not changed. More people know about it. Okay. Everybody, all of us, and the 99% need to work together. It's far beyond the time when we can split up into various segments of various kinds. The only solution for tyranny is all of us to work together. And you might think tyranny is a harsh word, but I see a lot of tyranny. Corporate tyranny, tyranny of people who do not respect anything except the dollar. So, the DACA resolution is worth passing. Then passing that resolution will tell people around us how we feel. Longmont is full of a lot of good-hearted people And this is another opportunity to demonstrate that. And, but how about some clean air and respect? Thank you very much.
Frank Beckvar.
Councilman, Mr. Mayor, my name is Frank Beckvar, 3613 Sunflower Circle. I appeared before you 2 weeks ago, and I appealed the project. My project was denied by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and in that denial, I just want to talk a little bit about it. The entire, almost 80% of the entire argument in that commission had to do with a 15-foot access easement on the east side of my property, okay? Which that commission said I never mitigated for and was an undue burden on those neighbors. I planted 58 extra grass plants. I added 11% additional open space. A residential design that matched their houses. Windows that they couldn't see directly at. That council commission didn't realize they said we needed to mitigate more. We needed a fence. They didn't even know there was a fence there already, and that none of those neighbors can even see that easement. Not to mention that same neighbor was 106 feet away, 35 yards away, and it was an undue burden on an easement they can't see. They argued about grass. They argued about grass creep. They argued about trees that the city said had to come out. It was not an undue burden, in my opinion. Councilwoman Finley was there at that meeting. She knows this was an injustice. In her words, she said they missed it. This project should have been approved. Councilman, use her as your crutch to get an understanding of what really happened. How can 6 people look at a project in a packet for less than an hour and make a decision on $1 million project, while their decision to banish this project holds more clout than a unanimous decision by a planning and zoning department that I held arms with for 1.5 years, and they said they didn't know what they were doing. I think Don Bruchette, I think Karen Bryant knew what they were doing. And voting tonight for this project is voting for a long-time small businessman. I've been here 22 years, and this is a dream of mine. You'll also be voting tonight for a green project. You'll be voting for a unanimously approved decision by a department that knows what they're doing. Take 30 seconds and take your time when you vote for this project tonight. I have 3 years in this. My family depends on it, and I depend on it. Thank you for your time.
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney. I would advise Council to disregard the comments here. This is a quasi-judicial matter. The City Council needs to decide, make their decision based on evidence provided at the hearing. The hearing has already happened. My understanding is staff advised the applicant that it would be procedurally improper to make these comments, yet he chose to do it anyways.
Ron Gallegos.
Ron Gallegos, 424 Park. I come this afternoon or this evening to talk about ordinance 0-2017-61, item 8C, the marijuana ordinance. I am concerned, and I have been concerned all along with this process, that we should be taking a market-based approach, and I also felt that we should be using the process in place, the same process we use for liquor licensing. Looking at the proposed ordinance, and it is 49 pages, I quit at 22. I am concerned that it would not withstand legal challenge. There seem to be elements in there that are arbitrary and capricious. I think there are items in there that violate due process. There's a high degree of randomness. It looks, in my estimation, a camel. A camel is a horse designed by a committee. We have ample legal precedent for the process in place. I was on the council that moved from a citizen advisory board for liquor licensing to the judge in place. That has been, in my estimation, a satisfactory process. I think if we use the same indices and processes in place for the licensing of marijuana establishments, we would be going a long way to coming out with a very satisfactory and a tried and true and proven methodology. So I am concerned with the proposed elements in this 49-page or 49-page document that we have some real legal liabilities and some openings. And let me just say, for process of illustration, the DUI ordinances are only 9 pages in length, not 49. Thank you.
Tony Landy.
Tony Landy, 453 Newman Circle. I would like to speak on the same topic as the medical marijuana, mostly on the restrictions of where to put it. I'm a building owner in the city here. I have a building at 3rd and Lashley, and I believe that by using the same restrictions as the alcohol, you're kind of strangling the options there are for places for them to open up and be. The building I'm at, if you go by the restrictions, you have to be 250 feet, you have to be so far from the school and everything. My building meets all of that except the 250 feet restriction from the residence. And where it's placed is right on the border of Boulder County and Longmont. I'm right on the street there, Rogers Road. And there are a few houses there, but it's basically all commercial. And I would like to suggest that maybe it would be based on each individual building or application rather than a broad statement of this, that's it, done. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Norris. Mayor and City Council members. I'm Bob Norris. I live at 532 Ryder Ridge Drive here in Longmont. And this evening I wish to share with you my experience with many DACA recipients. But first, let us be clear. Being here without documents is a civil issue. It is not a criminal act. In fact, undocumented men are much less likely to commit a crime than native-born men. Most DACA recipients that I know are working and going to college. They are paying taxes, although they're not entitled to the many benefits that U.S. citizens are entitled to, having paid the same or similar amount of taxes. The many DACA recipients that I am privileged to know are well-mannered. They work, they go to school, and volunteer. Several of them have volunteered for citizenship workshops without comité, even though they do not currently have a path to citizenship. As Rod Schmidt, former board member of the school district, said while considering education legislation, these young people have been to my house with my sons and daughters for several years. They are good kids. I have been unable to tell any difference between them and my kids. Brought here as a youth, as young as 11 months, most DACA recipients did not realize that they were not citizens until they applied for driver's license or college scholarship. They grew up just like your kids and my kids. I urge you to support the bipartisan Green Act, both as city council members and individually, as has Senator Gardner and Bennett and Congressman Coughlin. Just as if you were supporting
legislation for your own sons and daughters and their friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon Fender.
Hello, Shannon Fender, Director of Public Affairs for Native Roots, Colorado. Native Roots Longmont is located at 19 South Sunset Boulevard. We are just outside the city in unincorporated Boulder County. Thank you again so much for your attempts as council to find some balance in the competing ideas about the ordinance regarding recreational and medical marijuana in Longmont. Unfortunately, we don't think that this ordinance is something that is very beneficial to the folks who have been operating in the unincorporated counties. The option to annex in. When we started this conversation with you all, it seemed clear that you all were looking for a limited number of operators who have been active in the community and to help mold them in. And unfortunately, the way that the ordinance is written, it doesn't look like we would be able to come into the community having a license without first annexing and going through the process and potentially losing the license that we have in unincorporated Boulder County. And so we have some concerns with the way that it is currently written. I would be happy to follow up with staff if council is considering any changes to the ordinance tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Stewart.
Scott Stewart, 229 Grant Street. Mayor, council members. Here's what's troubling me. It's about the airport again. Words matter and truth matters. The continued effort to market the airport as an asset that makes the city better is misleading. The airport is supposed to be self-supporting and every effort is made to make it appear this way. These efforts include lowering the rate in which the airport is responsible for services provided by the city, representing 5% contribution to improvement funds as a match to most of us is 50-50. Representing the cell tower income as some kind of aviation related activity and hiding it in the miscellaneous income. Let's face it, there's been a long and deliberate effort to make this airport appear to be self-supporting and an asset. Look at the true numbers, please. I spoke at last week's study session, and David Slater has brought to my attention the methodology of the 2013 CDOT report and how it differs from the 2018 report. The methodologies are different in the 2013 report, and the 2013 report focuses closer on, hang on a second. The 2013 report doesn't have the same methodology as 2008. 2008 kind of takes this the state multipliers and stuff into effect, so that's why it was an inflated number. The trouble is that people in the positions of trust and authority use these numbers to make important decisions that have lasting impacts. Decisions were made based upon the inflated numbers of the 2008 report, and we can't unscramble that egg. Please, when the next report is presented, please take the time to understand how the report was created and what the numbers truly mean. And if you get an opportunity to look back on Friday's Johnny St. Parain, I think it's really interesting about a person in Iowa that's being affected by airplane noise, not actually from our airport, but they've lived there for 20 plus years, and things change, and now they're a little bit more negatively impacted by a flight pattern going into another airport. We can do our due diligence here. We can do what we can in order to make the smartest decisions before we purchase a home. But when you guys change the game, it affects us without us being able to control it at all. So we have investments here too. Thank you.
Strider Benston.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Strider Benston, 951 17th Avenue. and make it permanent. I support Michael Belmont's addition to the DACA resolution. Kids are kids, and a lot of them are young adults now, and they need their rights and citizenship at some point, and not way off in the future. I agree with most of what I've heard tonight, Gordon and Jim Kenworthy and Ron and others. Jim spoke about democracy, and we got to rebuild it from the bottom up because it's being destroyed at the top. The president of this country a month ago actually spent 2 or 3 days saying something decent for the first time in his career. And then he got bored and went back and started new wars. He started war against Steph Curry. He started another war against John McCain, the National Football League, threatening nuclear war with North Korea, decided, oh, let's have a war against Iran because we've got a resolution by the whole world in place to where they're not going to have nukes, so let's make sure they have nukes so we can have another war. Or maybe Venezuela or Cuba, it doesn't matter. He wants a war. He wants to kill people so he can go down in history as a great killing president. It is that dangerous. He invoked Pat Tillman, again, who was killed by friendly fire in Afghanistan. Pat Tillman's mother said, do not use my son's death as a political football for your power. This is how serious it is getting these days. And as people have said, we have to rebuild our democracy from the bottom up. This president said, people who carry Nazi flags, the swastika, and carry torches to threaten a church at night and then kill a young lady who disagreed with them, that they're good fellows, they're good people, fine folks, I think his word was. And then he attacks football players who kneel out of respect for the right to equal rights, especially if you're confronted by policemen. One of the people, I'll go quickly here, I can't think of his name this quickly, a football player who retired last year to work on social justice. His cousin was a jazz player, and he was driving home one night, and his car broke down, and a policeman came up and shot him and killed him because he was standing outside in the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Soto?
Good evening. Thank you for having us, council members and honorable mayor. My name is Laura Soto. I live at 1419 Red Mountain Drive with my daughter. This is Shixi. We are here to ask you to please pass the resolution on DACA, support DACA recipients. I am a DACA recipient. I am a graduate of Colorado High School in Glenwood Springs, valedictorian, the year 2000. The year 2000 is when the DREAM Act was first started. That's more than 17 years ago. Now my son is graduating high school. He will be going to CSU. He's currently a student at Skyline High School. We're very excited to see him move on and make his dreams come true. He will be starting this fall. My daughter here, she's a student at Trail Ridge Middle School, and they're both in the St. Vrain Valley. I'm very proud to say my daughter decided to be a council member at her school. She is part of the student council, starting her very first year in middle school. My kids have looked up to me their whole lives. I'm a single mom. I'm the only one they have to provide and to show example as to how to be a great citizen and member of our community. What President Trump did when he rescinded the DACA program with his executive authority was to put all of us in danger of being kicked out of our country and separated from our family. because the DACA program was deferred action for childhood arrivals. I was not born in the United States. That is why I'm a DACA recipient. But I have lived here from age 6 months. Again, I was not born in the United States, but this is my country. This is where I have grown up. This is where I have raised my children. I have raised them the best I can. I have served the community at the Center for People with Disabilities here in Longmont. I have served the community at the Longmont Restorative Justice Program. I have been a volunteer of many years for my students' schools, and I am currently working at the McKinley Law Group helping victims of crime, because my calling has always been to help others. If the DREAM Act is not passed this year, after 17 years of fighting for this comprehensive and just legislation that would give us a path to citizenship, if it is not passed now, I would be in danger of being kicked out of my community I love and out of the lives of my children. So I really wanted to speak to you from the bottom of my heart to consider the lives that are at risk at this very moment and the future lives that are also at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Dima Bacchus?
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I'm here about the motion to allow up to 4 recreational marijuana shops to operate within certain confines of the city of Longmont. And while I do think that some of the regulations that are in the ordinance are too restrictive, and of course I would like to see some of them, though not all of them, taken out of the ordinance, I think it's much more important to prioritize making sure that marijuana can be sold within the boundaries of the city of Longmont. Currently, Longmont is losing jobs to Boulder and other areas within Boulder County because they have been able to capitalize in the marijuana market, and we have been less able to do that. The 2 shops that are open outside of the city's borders have been notably crowded, and I think that it says something when the city is not allowing for legal recreational sales within its borders, when other cities in Colorado that are much more conservative have been. And I feel like it would be more reflective of the citizenry if we allowed for legal recreational sales. Thank you.
Thank you. Sonia Marquez?
Sonia Marquez, 1012 South Kaufman Street. Mayor, City Council members, thank you so much for this opportunity today. I, lifetime resident of Longmont, it's a very emotional day for me because in 2010 I approached council requesting to put the DREAM Act on the agenda. And the reason is because I work directly with young people who pledge allegiance to this flag and consider this country their own. The only thing they lack is citizenship. Because they do not have a social security number, they are not able to do a lot of things as myself as a citizen is able to do. In 2010, City Council refused to even put it on the agenda. So to see it here on the agenda gives me hope. City Council has an opportunity to stand up as a city for its residents. Many of the young people who are here today are impacted directly and have DACA and currently are in the process of not knowing what their future is in this country. They are teachers, they are students, they are computer engineers. They work in many different sectors and love Longmont, live here in Longmont, and want to be able to stay here in Longmont. As City Council members, you all are elected officials and have the obligation to stand up for our community members. And by you taking a position on this resolution and the DREAM Act sends a very, very strong message to our Congress, to our President, that we care and that we want these young people here, that they belong here. So I'm asking you today to find it within yourselves to take this strong stance in supporting this resolution and supporting the DREAM Act. We have a bipartisan support. Both of our senators, Republicans, Democrats, have come together to support this. So please support this today. Show us that you care and give Longmont a message saying that we can pass this resolution and that we can support our young people, the dreamers who are here today. And I just want to thank you all, and especially Laura, for sharing your beautiful story, because that's really who these young people are. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose Moreno?
Hi, I'm Jose Marino, and I live on 302 14th Place. I just want to say that I've been in this country my entire life, and that's all I know. And I grew up thinking that I wasn't different than all my classmates and stuff, and it's hard knowing that our president wants to take these dreams away from all these young people like myself, because I have DACA. And by 2 days, I missed the renewal date, and I can't get it next year. And I hope that we can find it in our heart to push for this, because it affects me, because since I got my DACA, I was able to work, and I didn't have to be afraid to go outside anymore, and it really helped me a lot. And I just hope that you guys can find it in your heart to push for this resolution. Thank you.
What is your name?
Jose Marino.
Thank you. This is everyone's first call, public invited to be heard, so now we'll move to the consent agenda.
Mayor Coombs, your consent agenda item 8A is ordinance 2017-59, an ordinance designating the Price Hartman House at 1400 East 9th Avenue a local historic landmark. Public hearing and second reading is scheduled for October 10th. Item 8B is ordinance 2017-60, a bill for an ordinance approving the Second Amendment to the lease for Vance Brown Municipal Airport hangar parcel H17. Public hearing and second reading is scheduled for October 10th. Item 8C is ordinance 2017-61, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 6, 9, 10, and 15 of the Longmont Municipal Code on marijuana store regulations. Public hearing and second reading is scheduled for October 10th. Item 8D is resolution 2017-93, authorizing an agreement between the city and Jimshi LLC for the purchase of real property for the South Pratt Bridge project. Item 8E is resolution 2017-94, approving the 2017 intergovernmental agreement for bus service between the city of Fort Collins and the city of Longmont. Item 8F is resolution 2017-95, supporting the extension of the deferred action for childhood arrival program. Item 8G is approval of 2 capital improvement program amendments, and staff does not have the need to pull any items.
Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'd like to pull 8C.
Okay. I guess I'll make a motion that we pass the consent agenda minus 8C. Second. Okay, let's vote on the consent agenda. And that passes 7-0.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is ordinance 2017-57, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2017. And there is no formal staff presentation on this item.
All right. Okay, if there's no questions from council, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing on ordinance 2017-57. Is there anyone from the public like to speak on this? All right, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing on the ordinance 2017-57. Councilmember Moore? Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'd move ordinance 2017-57.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 7-0.
Our next item is ordinance 2017-58, a bill for an ordinance approving the vacation of a 5-foot utility easement on lots 1 and 2, block 89, original town of Longmont, generally located south of 2nd Avenue and east of Main Street. And we do not vote on staff presentation on this item.
Okay. If there's no questions on this from council, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing on ordinance 2017-58. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on ordinance 2017-58. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I move ordinance 2017-58.
All right, let's vote on ordinance 2017-58. And that passes 7-0. Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break?
One thing.
Sure.
While I voted on the consent agenda to move the marijuana ordinance forward, does not in any way mean that I'm going to vote for it on second reading. Just making that clear. Just trying to get things moving along. Oh, what's pulled? Oh, I'm sorry. I can vote against it. You can vote against it. Well, I'm hoping that 6 of you will come together and do something well. I have it written down.
So I already gave it to you.
when do the ballots actually get mailed out? You don't know?
16th.
The 16th of October? So basically that's when the voting actually starts.
But that's just, that's
So that's why we
right for the well, this is like if that ordinance were to pass, they listed out what they would so it's like, but if that doesn't pass, none of it happens. It's just like them saying what they spend on additional funds.
That makes sense. Even reading. Yeah.
It's like I tried to like copy the link I shared on Facebook, and it's just like a static photo. Really?
Did you put the YouTube link on Facebook? Did you put up a story on the Longmont server?
I can do that right now.
That's what I would do. Yeah, that's fine. City council. Put the YouTube link up so it shows. Put it in the video. Set up a video.
We'll make it art.
Yeah, good. Right.
We'll see. I'll
Can we take our seats
marijuana discussion could go on a long
Our next item is the one pulled from consent, which is ordinance 2017-61 on marijuana store regulation. And Sean Lewis, if you'd like to start this off.
Okay, it's Councilmember Moore pulled it, so thank you very much. One of the things I've really been consistent on through this whole process is that I will support this ordinance if we have the marijuana tax attached as a requirement for this ordinance to pass. And with that, so not wanting to beat around the bush too much, I'm going to move to amend the ordinance to make the sales of recreational medical sales of marijuana conditional on the marijuana tax passing. Now, then, if everybody seems to tell me that the tax is a guarantee, well, I don't buy that. I want to see the tax pass before we actually implement this ordinance.
Councilmember Christensen. I don't see what the connection is, frankly. This is really the tax. This is something that staff has worked really hard on for about 2 years, and It was first brought forth by Councilwoman Finley, and it was brought forth by me. We've all worked on it, and just to make it dependent upon a tax issue doesn't make any sense to me.
Got a motion, but I haven't heard a second yet.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Councilmember Beck?
Councilman Moore, can you make a clarification? Are you saying that if the excess tax above and beyond the retail tax does not pass per the ballot issue, that we will continue to ban marijuana within the city limits?
Yes.
I don't agree with that at all. These were two separate issues. We voted to allow marijuana stores within the city limits, and then we also decided to have an excess tax on it.
Well, we've got a motion, it's been seconded. Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess my question is, does anyone here have a problem directing staff to meet again? I mean, as everybody knows, the history of my viewpoint on this, which nobody cares, but you might remember, is that I didn't want a free-for-all, because no other cities have done that except Denver, but even they admitted it was a mistake and sort of pulling back. And so as a compromise, I was thinking, yeah, 4 stores, and then we can give 2 of the people, or 2 of the stores that are just outside Longmont city limits the opportunity to annex in. It sounds like I don't know the industry well enough to know why they have a problem with the ordinance, but my concern would be that we have not made overtures appropriately to those 2 stores to convince them to come into the fold, so to speak. So my question is, if I were to move that we direct city staff to approach those 2 facilities to look at how the current version of this fairly lengthy ordinance impedes their willingness to annex in and participate as 2 of those 4 stores, would anyone object to that?
You know, we've already got a motion that's been seconded that we need to
Oh, that's true.
deal with first.
Don't come to order. God, after 6 years, finally he's got it down here. Fine.
All right, let's vote on
I was just saying that too.
on just Moore's amendment. So okay, his amendment fails. 2-5 with Councilmember Moore, Councilmember Bagley voting yes, and everybody else voting no. Okay, Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs and fellow council members. So again, my question is simply, now that it's a more appropriate time, would anyone object to city staff reaching out and understanding, or maybe city staff already knows, because why? So Harold, question: have we talked with these 2?
Sean, do you want to talk about your communications?
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Sean Lewis, Assistant City Manager. Several months ago when we first started this process, we did talk to Native Roots, and at that time they indicated that they were interested in annexing in. Our information from the other store in the Longmont planning area, Green Tree, was based on public comments in which she said under no circumstances did she intend to annex in. So we do believe there is some interest from Native Roots, and so Aaron Fawcett can address the ordinance on how we wrote it into the ordinance that they are given the opportunity to do that, and then be able to basically have a leg up on the competition to be one of the 4 license holders because they are in the annexation process.
And that was my understanding as well in reading the ordinance. But my question is,
so the answer,
reach out.
We're not sure, unless Aaron's had the conversation. Well, we believe we had this conversation, but Aaron, do you know?
Mayor Coombs, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley, Council, the way that we had intended for the ordinance to be written
is that there's essentially two parallel processes. One would be this request for expression of interest, whereby interested applicants, either within Boulder County, adjacent to Longmont, or elsewhere, would submit an RFEI to the city to be considered to be one of the 4 businesses. For either of those 2 businesses that also potentially wanted to annex to the city, there could be a parallel process if they chose to potentially annex, whereby they submitted an application for annexation referral that would be brought to council, and the ordinance stipulates that within 63 days of an announcement of that RFEI, they would need to submit that application for annexation referral, which is that first step in the process. Those are separate, but obviously related. I think that there is potentially a need for us to clarify this with those businesses that are within our planning area. It sounds like there may be some concern that there's certainly no guarantee for a license for either of those 2 businesses. You'll see later in the selection criteria that there is criteria for consideration for businesses that have already been there, and I think that was council's direction initially. In no way did we intend for the ordinance to say that a business would have to complete the annexation process in order to be selected, and I think we all acknowledge that if a business that was within our planning area tried to go through the process and was not selected, we would expect that they likely wouldn't continue through the annexation process. And so I think we need to potentially sit down with those 2 businesses, clarify that, have our attorney make sure that that language is reflective of what we intended it to be, and I think that it is. But make sure that that's easily understandable. So I think we're generally on the same page, but I think we need to have some additional discussions around that.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I'd like to see happen, because I got the impression that they were under the impression that if they apply and don't get it, then they somehow give up their county licensure. And so if that is somehow true, we need to fix that or clarify it with them that that's not the case. So I guess I would ask that we give staff direction via consensus to partake in those discussions, and we can go ahead and pass this particular consent agenda item and then have it ready for second reading. So
all right, I guess I agree with that. I guess another thing that we need to make sure that the corporate entity that owns the store has a way to sell their business in the future. I'm sure that that's all worked out. And, I've read the legalese of it, but a lot of time between first and second reading to go through all that. Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I would second Councilmember Bagley's motion, and I agree that we need to maybe clarify that ownership. And a question that I have is, if they stayed in the county and they wanted another store in Longmont in the city, could they have 2 stores then in the city? And I mean, that's okay with me, but I couldn't tell by reading this.
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Finley, the answer to that question is they can, if they choose not to annex, then they can submit for a new store within the city limits of Longmont. There's nothing precluding them from doing that.
And I don't remember having that when I read the ordinance. It said that a person could only have 1 store, an entity could only have 1 store within the city. I don't remember having that conversation. Does everyone remember having the conversation? Because I don't.
So, Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Finley is correct, and I am trying to remember if we specifically discussed that. I guess it's something that we found in every ordinance that we've seen so far in other communities, in that a company can't have 4 licenses. One company can't have 4 licenses. So we're simply, the restriction in the ordinance is simply saying that you can only, if you are a company, you can only have 1 store within the city limits. However, if they're outside the city limits, like in our planning area, they can't.
I'd keep the one in the county and apply for a second one so they could have 2 stores here. That's fine.
And they are certainly welcome to do that.
Okay. Councilmember Peck?
Thank you. I would agree with Councilman Bagley's suggestion about the difference between the county license and the city license, but do you already know that answer? do they lose their county license if they are annexed?
I'll take this one, Mayor, Council Member Peck. I think it's a conversation that we should have with them. There is no state procedure that I'm aware of that allows you to transfer a license in one location from one local jurisdiction to another local jurisdiction for the same location. I don't think there's a specific process. So my thought is that they would apply to the state for a new license for the same location or for a different local jurisdiction. Now, I think, I don't see any reason why the state would take that to mean that they're giving up their license within the county jurisdiction. I think that it would make sense for them to coordinate with the state on that and make sure. But in order for us to make sure that they're going through the state procedure that we require as a prerequisite for local licensure, there needs to be some state procedure they can actually go through, and that's the only one that I'm aware of, the procedure for a new license.
Councilmember Christensen?
Once again, thank you too for so much work. This is, there's so many convoluted little issues, you know, and down to, because that's why we are proceeding slowly, because it is a complicated issue, and just throwing ourselves into it 10 years or several years ago, I don't think any of us wanted to do that. So there are several issues that we were talking about before, specifically the issue of selling the business and how that would work. If, for instance, a business began to fail and they wanted to sell it, but keep the license with the business, or keep the, I don't know, keep the license at that location. How would that work? And then another issue is the state vets the applicants, who are usually the owners. The owners are not the same though as the managers, and the owners sometimes have nothing at all to do with the business on a day-to-day basis. So the people who actually need to be vetted are the managers more than the owner, the applicants, and yet our language consistently says the applicant. So it would be, I think, maybe wise to think about that a little bit, and yeah. Anyway, I have some of the same concerns that Mr. Gallegos has, in that I want to be sure that we really are kind of regulating this the way alcohol is regulated. So as long as you're comfortable with that, and you are comfortable with that, because otherwise I think we are setting ourselves up for some liability problems.
Mayor Coombs, may I address that?
Yes, sure.
Again, Sean Lewis, Assistant City Manager. Councilmember Christensen, those are great points. We do have some slides, 2 slides, that overview the 4 comments that I understand you all as council members were sent by Amy Atwood. She did have some suggestions for the ordinance. We can go over those, some initial staff thoughts. We haven't had a lot of time to think about that, but certainly on the change of ownership, we have had a concern, and this has been expressed by a number of other cities, that a shell company essentially can come in, set up a store, and then immediately turn around and sell that, and the city is left dealing with a store that we never vetted through the process. It's a wholly different store. So what we have asked is just within that first 2 years of operation, that store cannot be sold. And so what the email that I believe you all received was talking about is, if the parent company of a multi-store company that's throughout the state, for instance, if it sells, would Longmont really have a concern with that? And so that would be something we could use your direction on if that is a concern. If not, we can probably modify the current language about selling the store. We also talk about if the investors can't change for the first couple of years, that might be something else that's not a great concern to you all. But we just wanted to bring that to your attention and get some feedback on that as a first issue brought up.
you know, one of my concerns is, I think we need to know who the investors are. I don't think we can have, you know, transparent investors. So if we know who the investors are, I don't have a problem. And it sounds like if that's the way it's written, the way I read it is we'll know who the investors are. So I think, you know, you guys have worked on this for many months, had a strong legal team, looked at all kinds of ordinances through all kinds of cities and found out what works, what doesn't work, tried to pull together the best ideas, worked with all the players. I think you've done a great job. You know, nothing's ever going to be perfect, but I think this is a pretty good job, and I think we should move forward. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coons. Well, you know, what happens when a year older, you kind of forget short things. I just turned another year just last week, so what I said earlier, I guess I get to vote on it one way or another tonight. Age, that's the mileage. It sounds like, from reading this, you guys have done a really great job. But apparently there's some questions that are still out there that may need to be fine-tuned before we come back to second reading. If this passes to second reading, and I'm assuming it will with one no vote from me, I would hope that members of council and those that are stakeholders would contact council members and staff members to try to hammer these out before we get to October 10th. While, you know, making policy is sometimes like making sausage. You want to have the best sausage you can possibly have. But I don't know about the syrup part, but maybe a little barbecue sauce, how about that? But to get the best product, it sounds like, in the way this looks, it's almost there. I would just hope before October 10th to almost, not everyone's going to be satisfied, not members of council, not stakeholders, and sometimes not even staff, but to try to make, and residents as well, to try to get this to where it's a little bit more tight. It just seems there's some strings that are out there that just need to be sewn up a little bit better.
Mayor, to that end, do you mind if we go through the other three issues that have been brought up?
Okay.
If there are no objections, we can tweak that ownership. If people don't have an objection to the parent company of a multi-store company selling, then we can make that modification.
Okay.
But again, prohibit the individual sale. Okay. And then the other one was the listing of the manager. Ms. Atwood also suggested that we allow for an interim manager until the license is granted, and so we don't see a big problem with that particular change. This was the one I think, Mayor Kims, you were alluding to. We are currently requiring basically that resume for the owners, and we are suggesting that we keep that in for investors, owners, etc. The suggestion was just limit that to executive management. We actually would prefer to keep it in, even though the state does require that. So I suppose if the state requires it and we get copies of that, then that could suffice. Okay. But otherwise, we don't see an issue with leaving it in.
Okay.
And then last but not least, it appears that in our language regarding butane being stored on premises, that may prohibit the sale of lighters and things like that. So we can certainly, staff doesn't have a problem making that change if you're okay with that, just to be able to sell small lighter type equipment in those stores. So we can also make that change.
Okay, yeah, I don't have a problem with this. Councilmember Reagan?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess my only question is it worth actually making these changes and having another conversation on the changes before bringing it back to second reading? Because if it comes back on second reading after we've made the changes, we're going to be making the decisions on the fly. It will be a permanent ordinance. And while I agree with Mayor Coombs, it's tough to get it exactly perfect. If we can take a study session and spend 30 minutes to get it as perfect as possible, I would much rather have one more, read at it and discuss it and make sure it's all wrapped up before we pass it. So I guess I would like to just kind of table this issue to the next study session and see what staff changes.
I guess I disagree. I think we should move it and make these, there's small changes. We'll get it into our packet a whole week ahead of time.
Or we can pass it tonight.
Yeah,
it's not like to have a discussion.
Well, yeah, we can still have the discussion. Councilmember Santos?
Yeah, it'd probably be the best thing if there's, council wants to pass this, but also give direction to staff to bring back the modifications. And even if it's an information item in our council packet, or if council desires, members of council desire to do it, have a hopefully 30-minute discussion at the next study session. That way, when we get to second reading, there's no trying to, oh, we need a 10-minute break to try to make this work. You know, that's when bad ordinances, bad legislation gets passed. So I think that's a good idea to at least move it forward, but perhaps have another discussion along the way.
Do we have time in our schedule for?
We do have time in our schedule. Actually, one of the things I was going to talk about is I know we would have to have the second reading no later than the 24th of October. So we have until that time to bring it forward. One of the things I was going to suggest is Mr. Kramer is also working on some other time-sensitive items for us related to oil and gas, and some discussions we're going to bring forward in the next few meetings. And so if you passed it today, I mean, we would try to stay on schedule. You know, the item that I think is going to take the longest is honestly the question about the annexation. One of the things that Dan indicated when I asked the question, well, is this a state issue? And the response was, and if I'm mistaken, Dan, let me know, but we're not sure that the state's dealt with an issue like this. And so we don't know if there is an issue or not. And I think that's the one that's going to take some time to understand. But we can definitely stay on track. We can try to stay on track, but worst case scenario, we could bring it back on the 24th.
Well, I would like to move ordinance 2017-61 with these minor changes, and then, you know, once you make those changes that we've discussed and approved, then we'll bring it back to a discussion and study session, but still move this forward.
So you have a motion on the table.
Yeah.
Motion. The one you made, to have the discussions and then pass on first reading.
I'll withdraw my motion. I withdraw my motion.
Okay. So then the motion is to go ahead and pass ordinance 2017-61 with these minor adjustments. Let's go.
Have a stand and talk about it.
Yeah. Councilmember Christensen, do you want to say anything before we vote?
I just want to clarify, this was originally supposed to be second reading October 10th, so we're moving it later? Oh, okay.
Yeah, still Saturday night.
Yeah, okay. Okay, all those are sensible things.
Based on what you just said, it looks like study session on the 17th, second reading on the 24th.
No.
No? Oh, you want it next?
So we want to, we still want to have second reading on the 10th.
We'll just send an info item with the change.
Yeah, we're not sure on the timing on the writing of.
Mayor, it's just a matter of being able to have the conversations, do our due diligence, and write a good ordinance for you to look at. If it's questions, or we can do it fast enough.
I guess I don't have a problem. We have to push it back to the 17th.
I mean, we'll still try to hit, well, I guess what I'm saying is we'll still try to stay with the timeline.
Okay.
If there's an item that comes up that takes more time, all that position will be later in the month of October, still before November.
Okay. Councilmember Santos?
Harold, I think, and Dan, I think trying to keep to the October 10th, the 2 weeks is good. But when we get to that October 10th, it's the time you guys are going to have to tell council, we need maybe another week or another 2 weeks, have the public hearing at that point on the item, and then, as we've done before, postpone it to a week or two later. But at least to keep this on track, because again, staff has worked, council has worked, stakeholders have worked to get this far. You know, I see it as, I'm going to vote no, but at least a good faith effort on the city's part to go forward.
Mayor, Queens, and Councilmember Santos, one other point I want to make. I appreciate the vote of confidence that we've really put a lot into this and done a good job, but anytime we have an ordinance this long and complicated, we seem to need to come back later for cleanups. And it wouldn't surprise me if we have to do that in the future too for this one.
Okay. Councilmember Beck?
So I just want to throw another thought in. Since we already know what the changes are going to be, can we just not have it in our packet and stay on schedule rather than have another huge discussion about it, since we've kind of agreed upon what we want the changes to be? We just voted on those.
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Peck, we will make every effort to have it in your packet, but certainly that could, I think that's similar to what Councilmember Santos is saying, is that we can be prepared to present on the 10th. And if you're comfortable at that point with the changes as made, then I think we can move forward. But if we as staff don't have time to make all those changes or get the clarification from the state, then I think that, you know, we can, again, still have the public hearing if we're ready to go on the 10th, but if not, postpone to the following year.
Okay, thank you.
And what we may have to do, just so council knows, is we may get the packet out on Tuesday for the other items. We may have to get this item out later if it's manageable. So that may be a later submission in terms of getting that information to you.
Okay. All right, we've got a motion. It's been seconded. It's time to vote. And that passes 5-2 with Councilmember Moore and Councilmember Santos voting against.
Your next item is general business, the appeal of the backyard dental preliminary final PUD development plan denial by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And Karen Bryant, are you going to make opening comments?
Councilmember Santos?
Mayor Coombs, as I was absent on September 12th, I have viewed the entire council meeting for September 12th, including this item, so I feel I'm able to be an objective participant in these proceedings.
All right, thank you. That's why we postponed it. So just to clarify, this is just a continuation. It's not, we're not doing everything all over.
Mayor Coombs, council members, in answer to your question, Mayor Coombs, I'm sorry, Karen Bryant, Planning and Development Services. Yes, this is a continuation, and you are at the council discussion and decision stage.
Okay, so let's just continue the discussion.
What was what page number is this? The 11-8 page. I just don't know whether
It's 279, mine.
279. Okay, 11 pages up.
Councilmember Christensen?
I guess I'd like to hear from Councilman Santos first, since he didn't get to say anything before, because he wasn't here.
Councilmember Santos?
I would love to hear what you guys thought for 2 weeks, because it seemed like decisions were made prior, which is really not a good process. You know, watching the council meeting was a hoot. I can tell the applicant appellant's zeal, a little too much zeal sometimes. But I'm wondering what planning and zoning, I do wonder what planning and zoning was looking at. And while I understand some of the comments that were made that if I was on planning and zoning, I would have voted this way, but now I'm on council, I'll vote that way. You know, in the end, we have to look at what did the Planning and Zoning Commission make a decision that was based on the procedures that they are supposed to follow. And having been the planning and zoning liaison at one time, you can see where planning and zoning, some commissioners can get a little too personally involved and use, instead of using the reasons for or against any development, more use of talking of emotion. Watching each of your responses, and I see that I can see where there are some, I question some of planning and zoning's recommendations, and the recommendation to deny. With any development, whether it be housing, commercial, residential, multifamily, there usually are some adjustments to widths, trees, things of that nature. I did not see, looking at the evidence in the packet, but also in the evidence presented, that there were any outstanding or crazy requests being made. I know where the parcel, I again looked at the map, see where the parcel is. I drive on 17th also, Councilmember Christensen quite a bit. It's in a PUD. I do question what planning and zoning. I don't know, Councilmember Baghdad, you made the comment, did they just check out? It seems that they may have this time. It does happen. Even council sometimes checks out.
After 11 o'clock at night, sometimes we get some pretty poor decisions.
Exactly. So I can kind of see where you guys punted some, but I do question. I do have some. You know, I wanted to go back and look at that planning and zoning commission, but I did read that video, but I did read the minutes. So those are my thoughts, Councilmember Christensen. But since you guys had a little bit more time to percolate on the issue, because I heard that time and time again in the video, I just need another week. I need another 2 weeks to think about it. So now I'm going to put this back on you guys, since I was, you know, not in dire straits, but somewhere else where I couldn't get back in time. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
I guess I'll speak up. This one's tough. You know, I think it's I'm leaning towards supporting decisions. Seems like every time that some project has come across council, the neighbors around it, usually 30 or 40 of them, have been against it. Now it's 3 or 4 or 5. And I think it's a great project. And when you look at where it's at, it's really kind of a commercial area over there by the FAA Safeway. I think it would fit well. I think it would look good. I think it would actually enhance the property values around it. I hate to throw planning and zoning under the bus, because I think 99 times out of 100 they make really good decisions, but I kind of don't really 100% agree with their decision they made. That's kind of my thoughts. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I was there at Planning and Zoning, and they do give every decision a lot of thought. However, this time I think they were influenced. You can't tell by reading, but I think they were influenced by the couple of neighbors who came in and like you say, nobody wants change in their neighborhood, and they didn't want change. And I think it being an election year, and some of those folks thinking about elections in the future, they did not want to make anyone angry, except the opponent or the applicant. The planning department said it should be approved with their regular conditions they always have. I don't believe the decision was supported by competent evidence to deny this project. the reasons it was denied was because it affected the neighbors. Well, all building affects the neighbors. In this case, I think it would be a positive effect. And they said there wasn't adequate mitigation, but clearly there was adequate mitigation. It's across the street from the FAA, which is right next to the Safeway store. It's on a main arterial. It's not a quiet little neighborhood where someone's going to put in a commercial building. It's a business thoroughfare. I think some of them were angry because they didn't have a PUD designation that they could take advantage of. But certainly they could apply for it because it's in a commercial zone. All the review criteria were met. All the boxes were checked. Everything was checked. They missed it for whatever reason, and I think if we don't overturn their decision, that we're doing a great disservice to this man and to the community.
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you. I would disagree with you, Councilmember Finley, but I do think the decision is plainly inconsistent with the review criteria itself, as shown by clear and convincing evidence. I had a chance to think about it. I had a law school professor, Professor Hines, who taught forever, and he always said, make a good argument, which you did, and then show me a piece of law that you can hang your hat on. I do think that there is competent evidence in the record to support the P&Z decision. I don't think they exceeded their authority, but if you actually look at the review criteria, I think it's consistent with the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan. And that we were talking and looking at the statute, in general, it does comply with all applicable statutes, codes, ordinances, and regulations, or else we wouldn't be talking about it. It doesn't say, right? The application complies with applicable design standards and construction specifications, including for street utility design and layout, and adequate utilities are available or will be provided. The application is consistent with the intent and purpose of the zone. The application will not significantly adversely affect surrounding property, the natural environment, existing or planned city transportation or utility services or facilities. And finally, the application includes an appropriate transportation plan, including multimodal transportation access, which it doesn't, but you're right there on 17. So, I don't remember what time we were talking, it seemed late. And so, I would have voted against it because I didn't see this that night. So, I actually move, hold on a second, I'm just going to jump to it. I'm actually going to move that we reverse the decision of Planning and Zoning Commission with findings that the preliminary final PUD development modification does comply with the review criteria, or Resolution B, for the reasons that I mentioned, those 5 specific common review criteria for all applications, that in fact they were met, and P&Z got it wrong.
Second. Councilmember Peck.
Thank you. What I'm seeing is that it is the yard buffers, a requirement of 25 feet and going from 20 to 10 feet. And the applicant mitigating that with plants. That isn't in compliance with the zoning from what if I'm interpreting it correctly. So I'm not sure, but did anybody else see that that was a problem that planning and zoning had?
It was 10 feet to detention, not 10 feet.
The 25 feet is what I was looking at. So again, did I read that wrong, or did anybody else see that? Because it says reduction in the side yard buffers requirement of 25 feet for non-residential buildings. And they want to put it to 10 feet. 15 feet. Mitigated with trees. So, is that, my question is, and because I didn't see this or perhaps understand it, is that something that planning and zoning based their decision upon? I thought it was. So, I agree with planning and zoning on that. I mean, that is the code.
But PUDs are always brought forward with mitigating, and they work through planning and zoning. I mean, they work through our planning department.
But it does go to the commissioners for the final say on it.
Well, we don't always have to always agree with each other, but.
Well, it was also the 20 feet to 10 feet in the yard, rear yard setback. So those are the two things that I'm seeing.
Councilmember Christensen?
I think the other large thing that planning and zoning disagreed with was the adverse effect on the neighbors. I realized that several blocks away is Hover Street, where there's ample commercial development, but 17th, with the exception of the FAA, is until you get to Maine, or 2 blocks before Maine, it is all residential. So unless the envisioned Longmont plan envisions turning all residential areas into all commercial areas, or slow creep of commercial areas, I think this is a good project. I think it's the wrong location, even though there is a PUD zoning, but that was never acted upon. So it's, it's a very, I would uphold the planning and zoning decision, because I do think that it doesn't suit the neighbor. I think it would be detrimental to the neighborhood.
Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Well, this is one that there is some, I think we need to allow some leeway here on this, because it does meet, I'm looking for the review criteria again.
3 pages down. 282.
Oh, hang on 1 second, please.
Sorry.
Apologize, Mayor. I think when you look at the rear yard setback was brought up, and that opens up into a drainage or a retention area, which the purpose of these setbacks is to mitigate the impacts of your neighbors. So the side yard setbacks are more than you would see in a lot of residential zones as it is. I don't see that as being something that would be something I would consider a big deal. But I think the decision was inconsistent with the review criteria shown by the 5 common review criteria outlined in section 1502-040. So I do believe that we should be reversing the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, we've got a motion, it's been seconded, let's vote.
Mayor, if I could clarify on the motion, I heard Councilmember Bagley reference the criteria, but not Resolution 92B.
No, he did say, yeah, resolution, he said B, it's 92B. Okay, so we're voting for resolution 2017-92B. Yeah, which reverses the decision. We're waiting for one more vote. Okay, now we got it all. Okay, it passes 6-0. Councilmember Christensen dissent. 6-1. Excuse me. So,
Mayor Coombs, the next item is the 2018 budget presentation and public hearing on the 2018 proposed budget and 2018-22 proposed capital improvement program. Teresa Malloy, excuse me.
Good evening, Mayor. City Council, Teresa Moore, Budget Manager. We have 3 budget topics to talk to you about, and then our public hearing. So our 3 topics are our financial policies, the Downtown Development Authority, and the Public Safety Fund budget for the tax increase. While not in this order in your council communication, staff is going to recommend that you hold your public hearing first, in case there are citizens who do want to speak to you, and not have to wait through our 3 topics. So if you're okay with that, I'll introduce the public hearing. Okay. So our city charter does require that we hold a public hearing on our proposed budget on or before October 1st, and that we advertise that public hearing in our local newspaper. So we have also historically included in our public hearing our capital improvement program. So our public hearing will be on both the budget as well as our CIP, as well as our pay plan, if there are public who wants to speak on the pay plan as well. Public hearing was advertised in the Times Call as required by our city charter. Let me just quickly give you an overview of where our budget sits today. The total budget for 2018, including the changes that we've been speaking to you about thus far, is $315,207,439. This includes $60,326,697 for CIP projects and $82,693,636 in the general fund. So again, that includes all the changes that we've been speaking to you about. Just as an FYI for City Council, on our second public hearing, which will be next week, we will lay out fund by fund what these changes have been, so that we can reconcile back to these numbers that I just gave you.
Okay, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on our proposed budget? Come on down and state your name and
Ron Gallegos, 424 Kimbark. One of the considerations I think we need to make is there's an intangible, and that is living in a community such as we have and quality of life here. So while it's a worthy goal to pay 105%, I think we need to take into consideration there is a positive attribute, there is a benefit to living in this community. And I think that should be taken into consideration. It's going to be hard to monetize it. But if you're a professor teaching at CU, generally speaking, you take a $10,000 to $15,000 cut in salary to live in the community of Boulder because it is such a nice place. Well, I'm not saying that necessarily that's what we want to do immediately. I think it's something we need to think about in the future. Because the problem I sort of see is with taking a cost of living survey and doing it round robin with other municipalities, it will be an escalator constantly going up. And we need to get some sanity around these numbers because I think there is a positive benefit to living in the community. And if you're a member of staff, you should, I think, be living in our community as well. Those are my thoughts. And just some random things playing around in my little mind. Thank you.
well, every time I access my internet, I see the positive effect of living in this community. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak? Public invited to be heard? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing on our budget.
Okay, so our financial policies. So as part of every budget process, staff does review our financial policies, and then
what we do is redline essentially those policies for you. And our proposed financial policies in their entirety are included in attachment M. And that is reflected by using strikeouts for phrases and words that we're proposing to be removed, and then bold for phrases and words that we're proposing be added for adoption by resolution. So you will adopt your financial policies by resolution on October 24th, and at that time, the version of the financial policies that you will receive along with that resolution will be the complete policies. So after we get final direction from you, we will remove the strikeout and the bold, and it will be the final version for you. The other thing in the packet this evening, the policies that are in the packet this evening, is the implementation statements that reference an amount that's included in our proposed budget or adopted budget, are again struck through with the words to be updated after the 2018 budget is complete. So the version that you will get when you adopt this by resolution will have those final numbers in there as well. We want to call to your attention 5 financial policies this evening. There are more that we are proposing changes to, but the rest of them are really just minor updates, clarification, some very minor wording changes. Certainly if you have questions on any of those, we'd be happy to answer those questions. So the 5 policies that I wanted to call to your attention this evening, the first one is our sales tax collection policy. And this one, what we are proposing is that we add to that policy a statement in regards to the finance department utilizing contract auditors to conduct our sales and use tax audit. This is our current practice, and we just want to make sure that that is reflected in the policy.
Councilmember Moore? Tracy, could you clarify that? Is that for auditing remitters of sales tax or auditing the internal operations of the sales tax department?
I'm going to let Jim clarify that for you.
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Moore, that's for remitters of sales tax.
Thank you.
Okay, our second policy is the sales and use tax allocation between the general fund and the public improvement fund. As council is aware, this policy really governs that split of our sales and use tax between general fund and public improvement fund, with 85% of the sales and use tax going to the general fund and 15% going to the public improvement fund. And we have historically allocated as much of the use tax, because it is much more volatile, towards our public improvement fund, and more of our sales tax to the general fund. That served us really well in periods of economic decline because of the volatility of the use tax and the more stability, I guess, of the sales tax going to where our operations are in the general fund. Jim did mention to you earlier in our budget presentations that our desire to change that when we're not in an economic downturn and really just allocate it across the board, 85% to the general fund and 15% to the public improvement fund. So that is what we're trying to reference here or reflect here in this financial policy. The implementation statement then will indicate whether or not we're in that period of economic decline and we are again back into a situation where we're putting the more volatile use tax into the public improvement fund versus just splitting it across the board. And then our employee pay policy, we want to add a statement to that policy that states, because the city has high expectations and accountability levels For our employees, the city will strive to budget and manage salaries at 2% above market for all non-collectively bargained employees. And so again, this was something that Joanne had mentioned to you when she was discussing our compensation plan with you. That is our goal of 2%. Our 2018 budget is at 1%. And so in the implementation statement, we would then, from year to year, reflect what we are including in our budget. And so for 18, it will reflect 1%.
Councilmember Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor Coons. I'm going to push back on this one. I've had a chance to think about it a little bit. First of all, I would challenge the assumption. So in past life, I was actually the one Brian Larson was the one. But back when I worked with Jim Collins, we actually did extensive analysis on this issue right here. And companies, the data shows that companies that actually have the best employees actually receive below market. And so I don't have a problem by saying the city of Longmont will strive to establish prevailing market ranges to pay for city positions, but having a target that we're going, because we have high expectations and accountability, that we're therefore going to manage salaries at 2% above the market for non-collectively bargained employees, that premise is just wrong. And so I don't think we should have that in our budget. I mean, I think that it's our job as a city council. I mean, essentially we control the purse strings. I think we have phenomenal staff. That's not the issue. I also think that the staff should be fairly compensated. But there is no data to show that because you have high expectations and a high level of accountability, that you should pay your people 2% above market. The data shows that if you have the right people, the right culture, they actually don't need market. And so, as a matter of fact, that policy right there, that's what mediocre companies have, because they feel they need to pay more to attract people to work for the money, rather than the culture, the values, and the work. And so, I don't agree with the employee pay statement, those changes.
Councilmember Pack?
I disagree with that. Basically what I heard you say is that if you keep wages low, you have better employees.
That's not what I said.
It sounded like it. I think the statement's great. I agree with what you say in the employee pay.
Councilmember Christensen?
I do too, having worked in the private sector my whole life. I can tell you that's the main reason people leave. Telling people that you're going to pay them less than market rate it's simply disrespectful, and it makes it extremely difficult for them to do their, to afford to live. So I think we're on the right track there.
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. There was a study done where 1,435 companies that appeared on the Fortune 500 index since 1926, since the Fortune 500 list started being tracked. This particular study looked at the question of, okay, companies that outperform their peers by 3 to 1, let's try to find those companies and figure out what they did different than the rest of their industry. In general, of the 1,435 companies, there were 11 that outperformed the competition by at least 3. In general, they outperformed the competition by 6.9 to 1. And part of the data, not showing that it was cause and effect, was simply that they did certain things. I am not arguing that we should pay our city employees less. I personally am of the opinion that we should pay them prevailing market ranges. I am simply making note that this particular study found that it was unnecessary to pay above market in order to attract the best employees. And when you have a policy that says we'll always pay 2% above market in a public service sectors, such as the city and other municipalities, you're playing a game where, okay, we're always 2% above, then other people come to market, then we go 2%, then they go to market. We're constantly increasing. I'm not saying this based on my opinion. I'm not saying this based on, oh, well, I one time anecdotally thought this. I'm just saying that this is fact. And so I'm not making an argument that we should pay them less. I'm just saying that we should not have a policy saying that we need to pay them 2% above market because we have high expectations and accountability. So I just want to clarify, I'm quoting data. I am not quoting an opinion saying that we should pay our employees less than market.
Councilmember Santos.
So I wanted to also add, I think, part of the comments about the culture and the other things that are important are issues that you have to deal with to retain employees, because and that is something that we are trying to focus on as an organization. So we can talk about, the work that we've done with our cultural attributes and what we're, and that was designed by the folks in the organization, and trying to really spend time on that piece of the organization is really important, because a lot of times it is the difference maker in terms of whether people stay or go. I mean, if they're not happy with the culture, or they're not happy with their supervisors, those are things that you have to deal with. And so, to speak to Councilmember Bagger's point, that is exactly what we're trying to do with those other pieces of the puzzle, and trying to work with staff. And I guess my question would be, as we've talked to council about this, and we've talked about, this issue, this has been in the financial policies, and it was, the market rate. That's what we talked about. We had a conversation with council last year during the budget process, talked about the idea of 102. Part of that was also, and I think Councilmember Bagley asked the question last time, was also about how do you compare yourself, and we can provide this information to council at the next meeting. But one of the things that we know is that when we look at our organization compared to most of those that we benchmark against, we have fewer employees, and in many cases we're doing more work in a lot of our operations. I think you've seen some of that this year, where we've had to try to make some adjustments just because the growth and the volume of that workload has been something that we're dealing with, and that was part of the information that I think we presented Jim a couple years ago, 2 years ago, in terms of those items. So that was part of the discussion that we brought forward to council. And I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but we can bring that back to council and go over that information, because it's also a product of what they're doing and the volume of what they're doing.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coon. Unfortunately, we're not a corporation. We're not a company. And trying to attract, having seen, been in this chair for a little while, trying to attract and compete with public sector companies for people to come to work for the city, you try to entice them any way you can, with the culture change that Harold was introduced when he first came here, with trying to be competitive. Yes, we do have high expectations and accountabilities for all members of staff. And they should be compensated for that. I've heard time and time again from the last several years, HATS is one of the things that sticks out in my head. The HATS project. We had people working round the clock. Round the clock. Sending emails at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning. People didn't take vacations for a while, unless they were basically told you have to go on vacation because you're completely stressed out. If we need folks, then let's hire folks. But to compete with working for a government, it's different than working in the public sector. Trying to attract younger, not the word, again, in that Yeah, not that I'm young anymore. Yeah, I have 4 more years to get my AARP card. But trying to attract, 20-somethings that have just come out of college to go into government is difficult. You try to make, be as attractive as you can and saying, here's what we expect, and if you do this, here's how we're going to compensate you. I have no problem with this being. Again, trying, I hear time and time again, do government like business, treat government like business, make government like business. In some instances you can, in this case you cannot. Because businesses can do more things than we can as a government when it comes to employees.
Well, I have to agree with some of the points that Brian has made. I've read the Good to Great and seen the same statistics, and I've seen companies with the right culture do really well and not pay much above market to get those kinds of results, because it's the culture and job satisfaction that matters most to employees. It's not how much money they get paid. But I do think we do have a great set of employees, and we do a lot in almost every department. You look at, how many employees we have and compare us to other cities of similar sizes, and we do a lot with a lot fewer employees. So they are working harder, they're working efficiently, and because of that, I'm okay with the 102, even though I agree totally with everything that Councilmember Bagley is saying. I'll support this because of other, but typically, I don't know if it's going forward for the next 20 years. It's always going to be our policy to pay 2%, and let's say all the communities around us start doing that, and Lafayette's doing that, and all these other communities, and pretty soon, we're comparing ourselves with that set of data. Pretty soon, we're just artificially driving up this pay index too, so we have to be careful on that other end too. So, yes, Councilmember Christensen.
I understand what Councilman Bagley is saying, and I've read those statistics too. I've read Good to Great, but that you're talking about the most successful businesses in the country, and their businesses, and people who work for those businesses already have a higher than average wage. So you're comparing apples to oranges, comparing private businesses to municipal governments or to state governments, like the University of Colorado, where I worked for 15 years. We never got a raise. You don't get a raise. That's it. You may get a step increase or something like that. Then they eliminated that. But, people didn't work there for money. And that's what's going on in municipal government, too. People work because they feel that what they're doing is very important. And I agree with everything that Councilman Santos said. People are really dedicated here, just as we were. I was at CU at 5 in the morning working away for no more money than the week before, but because something had to get out. And you accept a lower overall pay by working in municipal government and by working for state governments, but you are in it because it's important to you. And I do think that, as Councilman Sanders says, trying to get younger people into municipal service is a challenge. We have to be able to offer this. I have no problem with offering people market plus cost of living increase, but we have to give them good incentives other than just doing good, because they still have to feel like they're getting some kind of rational, respectful reward.
Councilmember Beck.
Thank you. So my question for the study that Councilman Bagley quoted, when you say that some companies are outperforming others, is that based only upon the salary, the money part, or is it based, as our city manager said, upon the culture, there are many things that come into why people perform the way they do and why others do not. So just to pull one part of it out, which would be the salary, to me is not a very good overall picture of why a company performs. But looking at this, I also understand that if the market goes flat, we could have people who don't get salaries for 2 or 3 years, salary increases. So having a 2% increase for someone who is really performing well over market, I have no problem with that.
Councilmember Moore. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Well, in my 25 years of working with people and employing people, the most important thing to the employees was the work environment and their ability to come to work and want to do the job without hating it every day. That being said, salary was secondary in every case. Salary and benefits were what they would expect. You have to pay market in order to get anybody, but at the same time, I was in industries that provided opportunities for additional earnings, basically in bonuses. So if you worked as a team, your manufacturing facility performed well, your division performed well, you had additional incentives to work together and be as a team. So there was always that extra ability to earn above market. And I won't kid you, we have to pay market in order to get employees. And being in the government doesn't mean you shouldn't be getting paid at market. You're not getting paid less just because you're in this municipal government. We went years without pay increases because that's just the way the business cycles run. And but because we had good cultures, we had good opportunities for people to advance, people stayed with the companies. That's really what's important. I really don't think in this situation that I'm not opposed to 2% above market for non-collectively bargained employees for those reasons, is that we have to make sure that we keep our best employees and there are no other opportunities for additional revenue or earnings that are available to certain sectors of industries.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I agree that the city should have high expectations and accountability, and I don't have a problem with the 2%. I think the problem is the word because. Because the city has high expectations. We would have high expectations whether they got the 2% or not. So I think that's the only problem I have is with the word because. I think the city has high expectations and accountability levels, and I think the city should strive to budget and manage salaries at 2% above market. I don't think the because belongs there because is a bad word. The city should have high expectations whether or not we give 2% increases or not. And it isn't a cause and effect, as Councilmember Badgley said. It's really not a cause and effect. It's part of who we are. So I would just remove the word because.
Councilmember Bagley. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. That was very well said, Councilmember Finley. that is what bugged me. And then and then one other issue. It's kind of deja vu. It's the word 2% above market for all non-collectively bargained employees. How many employees do we have?
Over 900.
Okay, so again, I've never managed a company or a nonprofit or a for-profit with 900 employees. But if I were one of your hardest working employees, and I'm the one spending 18-hour days doing whatever it takes to prepare the budget, and you know, Joe next to me is cheating on his timesheets, not doing his trash routes, or Sally over here is not putting the library books back on the shelves because she's on her phone texting. Giving 2% above market for all non-collectively bargained employees is cheating your best employees. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'd rather take the 2% and give it to the people who deserve it. And so as it reads, my only point is saying this because you have high expectations and accountability is a problem I have. and giving it to all employees when all of them are not putting in that extra effort. And then again, maybe they are. Maybe we are just like 1 in a million.
No, so actually, you hit a good point, because it's something we've had to deal with in the compensation plan, and we've talked to council about it the last few years. Everyone won't get it, because you have to meet the minimum performance standards to get it. So if you're the person that is doing that, you will not be eligible for that 102. Now, if you're the person that's spending the 18+ hours, that's part of the exceptional benefit piece that we have, that we allocate, that supervisors can award to employees that meet the criteria that we went over with you all. Now, that's not in perpetuity. You don't, once you move to, let's say that Teresa has an amazing year this year.
Good job, Teresa.
And Teresa moves to 107. And let's say next year Teresa doesn't have that amazing year. That does not mean Teresa will remain at 107. We will then begin to ratchet back down into that piece based on performance to get at that issue, because what we were hearing from folks in the organization was exactly what you just said.
And so my point is that what you just described was what I expected in the current city policy statement. What you just said is not what it says here. The city will strive to budget and manage salaries at 2% above market for all non-collectively bargained employees, which is different than the policy you just stated. That's all I'm pointing out.
Mayor Cruz, Councilmember Patty, as the author of the statement under question. I just want to point what we're trying to do is make that statement reflect what the practice is that we're trying to bring to you, which is that we wanted to budget at more than market. We budget all employee salaries at market, and we wanted to strive towards budgeting to 2% above market. And then it says, and manage. So it doesn't mean everybody gets it.
So that's just the budgeting statement.
That's correct. So
why didn't you say that at the beginning?
Well, it's in the sentence. I said it probably 2 years ago when you told us to go ahead with that.
So in the managed piece is actually, that's the piece that I just described in the philosophy. Now, what I also wanted to say, and I want to be very clear, we are not at the top of the range. When we talk about this number, the way we set salaries is we go in and we say, here's the, and I'm looking at Jim to make sure I don't mess it up. We go in and say, here's the bottom of the range, here's the top of the range, and we come up with the midpoint. And that's what we set and we say is market. So there are folks above us and there are folks below us, and so we're really setting ourselves right in the middle of the groups that we compare ourselves against. What I can tell you today is we do not pay anywhere probably close to what Boulder pays. And I can also tell you, we just talked about this, Fort Collins, Westminster, what were the other ones that typically, and I say typically, are above us. Lakewood, those cities are typically always above us. And I wanted to make sure that was pointed out, because I didn't want folks to think that we are at the top of the range. We are not at the top of the range. We establish it by setting that midpoint between the ranges. And when you look at a lot of the information we have, what we'll find is our market is actually below the average of the actual in some cases. In most cases, what you say?
No, never mind.
Did we answer your question?
Yeah.
I want to make sure we answered Council's
Concern has
question.
been resolved. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Okay, Mayor and Council, so our next policy to call to your attention is a new policy that we're proposing to add for our waste diversion center. So basically, this, in a nutshell, this policy says that that waste diversion center will be open to Longmont utility customers for no charge, and that it will be open to the general public, provided that there is sufficient capacity and that the revenues and fees to pay for that service fully cover the costs of that service. And then the last policy is a policy for the airport administrative transfer fee. Sorry, it is an administrative transfer fee policy. The addition that we want to make is to the implementation statement to reflect the 50% of the fees are waived for the airport fund. So those are the financial policies, and of course, if you have questions on any of the others, we'd be happy to talk about those with you. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Jim then, who's going to present the DDA budget.
Mayor, Council, I'm going to just make a few comments, and then I will turn it over to Kimberly McKee and let her cover some of the highlights of what's included as the projects that are being funded with some TIP funds. I just wanted to explain, as I have in the past, I've given you a lot of data on the DDA budget here. I wanted, for your benefit, the public's benefit, give them the detail on all these funds and the different source of funds for the different uses within the DDAs. And they have 6 to 7 funds, and then there's the GID and the downtown parking fund as well. All of them have different funding sources. We've had some changes that I wanted to bring to your attention. And as I discussed last week with property tax for the city's general fund, we also had new numbers for both the DDA and the general improvement district. So we are increasing the proposed budget in the DDA operating fund by $17,300 with an offset of an increased line item for contingency expense, since we haven't identified uses yet. The DDA board wasn't even aware of the number yet, since it wasn't available at the time that we discussed this budget. And the GID budget is increasing by $7,000 over what was budgeted. And again, we are offsetting that with a contingency expense. So with that, the TIP dollars are rising this year as well. Expecting to come in at over $800,000 compared to over $600,000 this year. And in turn, we also have a number of projects, uses that Kimberly will cover. I just want to also point out that we also are using TIP dollars as we have in the past, and it requires a loan because of the legal limitations on the use of tax increment dollars within the DDA under state statute. But we do an internal loan, repay it right away. The other uses are the $36,640 for project management fees for the DDA operating funds, staff time in administering these projects. There's $32,000 and change of the annual cost for infrastructure renewal and replacement that the DDA has committed to put away under an agreement with the city on the use of since we allow them to get the full 100% tip of the city's property tax mill, they in turn put half of that towards infrastructure renewal and replacement. And then finally there's $55,000 of funding. We haven't done this in a few years, but it's the historical source of funding for the Arts and Entertainment Fund, and we need some dollars infused back in that fund for 2018. So I'm going to ask Kimberly to step up here, and she's going to talk about these projects.
Thank you. Mayor Coombs, members of council.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Coombs, members of council. Thank you so much on behalf of our board for all that you have done for downtown. We continue to find this such a meaningful partnership, and thank you so much. I know earlier you were asked to consider some additional maintenance dollars for keeping downtown clean, so we certainly appreciate that. 2016 has been a very exciting year for us. As I think you all know, we did update our master plan of development, and so a lot of next year's budget talks about the projects that we're going to be starting to implement that master plan. In our construction fund, you can see these different line items, and I'll talk about them briefly, but they do connect directly back to that master plan. The first is clean and safe. We feel like our alleys have been great, but it's certainly time to especially give the east side a deep clean, and so we do have some enhanced pressure washing and those type of things, as well as establishing a maintenance fund. Although we have some new things, we have a lot of fairly old and aging things that continue to break down. So looking at that maintenance fund. For our placemaking programs, again, these dollar amounts may not all be expended next year, but we are appropriating them so as the projects go, we have them available. We'll be starting to look at some design standards, looking at lighting, plaques, different kind of placemaking things that you feel as a community member when you're walking around downtown. Connectivity programs, as you know, we also just adopted the parking study, and some of that we talked about not too long ago. This is implementing some of those ideas, such as some of the education programs, some of the employee parking programs, and figuring out what kind of incentives we'd like to do there. Economic vitality, always looking at business recruitment and retention, looking at some customer loyalty programs, as well as some collateral to bring new businesses into downtown. For our incentives, one of the things that we talked about a little bit at your retreat and later on in some of our own things is getting office uses available to maybe move upstairs to get a more retail feel. And so we are going to be looking at some incentives that do encourage folks moving to the second floor or getting more office in our downtown. Metrics, again, we do feel like we need some different software, some different programs to help track our success and make sure how we're doing as an organization in a downtown. And then electrical assessments and upgrades. We have fabulous trees that have sometimes unruly roots that are getting into our electrical system, so it's time to kind of replace and update all of those. So these certainly help us as we move along with that master plan. And that's really all I have, unless you have questions on anything else.
Does anybody have any questions? Councilmember Christensen?
Going back to page 367 or S70, where it talks about, this is very nitpicky, but Longmont Downtown Development Authority, in the second paragraph it says about 40% of the increase is in personal services, and then it talks about personal services. So when I was reading this, I thought personal services are like manicures or something. Do you mean personnel? Isn't that what you mean?
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Christensen, that's correct. And within our budget, when you see in our line item budget, we refer to personnel services for all the salary and benefit accounts,
yeah,
and then O&M for the operating accounts. And I guess I'm just stuck on those old terms, and that's why.
All right. Okay. Fine. Now I understand. No manicures.
So now we're going to cover the public safety tax increase budget, and I'm going to ask Mike Butler to step down here because after I give you a little bit of overview of the budget, I'm going to ask Mike to cover some of the details of what's included in there. But just to explain, we don't have a full budget here. We have a ongoing budget that's been identified that's going to fund 20 FTE. And then in addition to that, we have programmed 8% for reserve, which is part of the financial policies based on the amount of sales tax dollars being added here. And then in addition to that, we will have one-time dollars, over $3 million available for one-time expenses. We've allocated over $2 million as part of a potential proposed budget. And then we have another $1 million more that we have opportunities to use that for, but haven't identified that. And the plan would be is if the tax does pass, we would solidify those uses and bring to the council at that time after the tax passes the actual budget to act on. But we wanted to give you a bit of a preview of those uses for yourself and the public. So I'll turn this to Mike.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Mike Butler, Public Safety Chief. There is a tax initiative on the ballot to increase the public safety tax. It'll amount to about a quarter for every $100 that's spent. And the positions that we're requesting in 2018 amount to 20. You've seen these positions already, but I want to talk about some of the two of the changes that are being made. One of the changes is that we've eliminated the fire prevention specialist because we're going to be able to fund that position out of the incremental development revenue. And the other position that has been eliminated from the initial set of positions that you saw is one dispatcher, because we've been able to fund that in the 2018 budget. And so, but we added 2 positions as well. And those positions are 2 body camera custodians. We do want to convert to body cameras in 2018. This has become something that we've been holding off on until we've seen a lot of the police departments go through cycle after cycle of either technology or new policies until they've more or less honed those. And now at this point in our county, the district attorney is highly encouraging all police departments to utilize body cameras for evidentiary purposes. The city of Boulder has had body cameras, Boulder County has body cameras, University of Colorado has body cameras, and I believe Erie also has body cameras, and I know Lafayette and Louisville are considering them. And so this is just a point of catching up to the technology that's now expected not only by our DA, but we're also getting requests from defense attorneys, and I think it's going to become a normal expectation on the part of the criminal justice system that police officers carry body cameras. So it's been around, the technology's been around, the push has been around since Ferguson for the most part, which happened in August of 2014. Again, we've held back until we thought we could develop a policy and practice that would work for us, until they got the technology to the point where they needed to get it, so we didn't have to cycle through. Boulder had to buy 2 sets of cameras before they got the right ones. And because of storage capacities and issues and needs with where that was headed, we weren't 100% certain. That's a little bit more firmed up now. We have some certainty about how we can store all of this. The specialists, the custodians themselves.
Mike, I think one of the things about body cameras, I know council may recall that we talked about it in the last budget presentation, but one of the challenges that we've had is as we looked at call volume, and we talked about that in the last year's budget, and that's actually, I think, what started the conversation about the public safety tax increase. As we were looking at the budget issues, we were always looking at officers, body cameras. And because of the call volume and the workload, we were always erring toward we need more officers. And council may remember we restructured some positions, and we eliminated an assistant deputy chief position. And with that in the budget, we added, I believe, 5 officers last year.
That was part of funding the 5 officers.
And so, but that was the decision point, officers, cameras, as we were looking at some of this in the previous budgets.
Isn't a big cost of body cameras is actually the storage of the data, and that has really significantly dropped over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, it's really,
And it continues to drop.
yeah.
So anyway, we subtracted 2 positions, but also added 2 positions that we think are going to be necessary to ensure that when requests come in for footage from body cameras, a redaction needs to happen, and there's going to be quite a bit of that. What we've learned from other departments our size is it's going to take at least 2 people to be able to do that on an ongoing basis. So, one-time priorities that Jim talked about will include body-worn cameras and storage. The 2 records management systems for police and fire are not cheap. I think fire is running around $200,000. I think police is close to $1 million to $1.1 million. We need to replace outdated systems. That's where we're at this point. There's a target system at the range. It's been at the range since the range was initially designed and built. A target system takes a lot of beating, I guess, from bullets. And over time, it gets damaged and you have to replace it. And that's about $250,000 expenditure. I think it's about $250,000 expenditure. So that's where a number of one-time dollars are going to go. And as Jim said, there's still $1 million out there that we're gonna have to figure out. We have needs where we can allocate that, but we'll wait until the public safety tax passes. So that's the extent of my presentation. Questions from any council if you have any?
One question is, if the public safety tax doesn't pass, does that mean we're not gonna get body cameras? We'll have to delay that?
That's exactly what that means.
Councilmember Pat.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Just out of curiosity, how do you store that data from the body cameras?
I may have Deputy Chief Satter come up because he's been doing a lot of the research, but we're going to be using an organization called TASER, they're now called Axon, and they've been able to develop a system where we can send it to them in the cloud and they keep it. And I don't know, Jeff, if you need to say any more than that, but that's...
No, that's fine.
Just that they have 2 servers on the United States. They also store a lot of stuff for the CIA.
It is secure.
Okay,
That's adjustable.
Thanks.
So we're not using Equifax to store
I think an interesting thing just to talk about how what we're doing to look at just different aspects. One of the things, based on our economic development activity, we have the opportunity to meet a lot of businesses. And one of the things that Jeff is working on the target system is that there's a company here that's doing some really cool things with developing target systems that are computer-based and increase safety. And so as we look at this, we're also looking at, are there other opportunities to partner in a public-private partnership in different ways with local businesses? They may not have the answer, but I wanted to point that out because those are some of the things that we're doing in a broader context across the organization is trying to build those relationships. It was just an opportunity for me to say that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Coombs, Council, that's all we had tonight on the budget. Next week is a study session where we will bring to you summary of the budget and the changes to this point. And then have one more public hearing, and then after that, we'll be asking for direction as well next week, and then prepare ordinances and resolutions to bring to you in October at your regular meetings.
All right, thank you. I guess now it's time for final call.
Can we take a real quick break?
Sure.
I think Sandy and Eugenia talk to you real quick.
Okay. Now let's take a 5-minute break or 10-minute break. 5, okay.
The whole point wasn't to get involved in national politics.
We're saying we want to do whatever to make it.
Go back.
Well, yeah, that's just the problem. We're not supposed to be messing with them.
They are, in my mind, it's the same thing, because that's the enacting legislation that enacts with that resolution.
Correct.
Well, it's a little different, because DACA DACA was a presidential program.
Right.
And so Congress can't change DACA.
What they have, what the Dream Act is doing is, the 2017 version is basically.
That's bipartisan.
The resolution says that you support DACA until a permanent legislative process is determined, which is the Dream Act.
Yep,
Right. So I just want to clarify, because if that way, if they come out and say, hey, the council supported the Dream Act, that's technically true, because that's what
We voted, I thought the resolution was first written.
It's good.
I would have preferred to.
It's good.
I was going to amend it, but I wouldn't.
Okay. I just want y'all to be clear about what they're walking out with, what we're walking out with the legislative policy.
Unanimous vote.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's what yeah. Right. Okay, thanks. There we go. Thank you.
And should we
I mean, that's exactly what it was.
I know.
Meaning
Yes,
that-
like you said, there's It really is. It made my whole night. I'm sorry. That made my whole
Although what sucks is
Pretty much chair. No, I hit my brain on me.
that's getting outside of the database and that sucks. That's like the one, that's like what you look at.
You were right about that. That's what I was saying.
I just think
I got the report in. I got an email saying it's coming. According to that.
They get twice as many paid
if you don't want to.
Yeah, I do everybody.
Although like, there are two things you can do to circumvent the system. And then if you don't pull people, will do it to one, you really want to circumvent the system. Are you willing to, if I were to bring you 3 kids under the age of 18, would you be willing to adopt them to get citizenship?
Seminars and stuff.
Because what
They marry somebody to get
yeah, no, but my point is, what you do, so what you do is if you relinquish your kid, I mean, granted, it's a game, okay? We're not asking anyone to relinquish their kids. But if you were to say, you know what, I'm going to relinquish my kids, they're abandoned. Actually, of course, terminates rights. Under the law, you have a 1 year's find the permanent home. Of course, you're like.
I think we should continue our meeting because we're almost done. So let's get this. So we're basically at final call, public invited to be heard. So is there anybody from the public who'd like to come down and speak now? Okay, I'm going to close final call, public invited to be heard. Now it's time for mayor and council comments. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I have coffee with council this Saturday and I'm unable to make it. Could someone take my place? Councilmember Moore, that would be awesome. Thank you.
We can all go.
Yeah.
The whole coffee with council.
All right, does anybody else like to speak? All right, city manager, do you have any additional comments?
Mayor and Council, just wanted to remind you.
Another date.
Correct, and I've had a similar request, and so we'll work with council to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, city attorney, any remarks?
No comments, Mayor.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
You do know for $9 you should go now with them. And you can watch them anywhere.
Or, Mayor, you have Player TV, right? You can log into HBO Go or whatever now. No, it's free. You have Player TV.
Oh, do you exactly?
Yes. Log into HBO. If you subscribe to Player TV, it should be. Yes, that's what they told me.
So Alex.
Yes.
Anything else you need?
Yeah, it worked well. This worked beautifully. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw something that you did the other night. It was much better because it was much closer.
Yeah, the book cover, yeah. We have book authors.
Yeah. Which is different? But I didn't really, we just watched.
It was a feel-good kind of thing. He's a self-help strategist. Well,
I got that.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. BNSF is always going to be.
Right.
And I know that every year when I